Emmylou Harris is one of the most respected and award-winning country performers of the past few decades. But how much do you really know about her life and her legendary career? Here's the untold truth of Emmylou Harris. Not only is she a talented musician, but Emmylou Harris is also wicked smart. Born in 1947 in Birmingham, Alabama, Harris's father was a Marine Corps officer who served in the Korean War. He was reported missing in action for a time and spent nearly a year as a prisoner of war before returning home. Because her father was a Marine, Emmylou and her family moved a lot during her childhood, ending up in Woodbridge, Virginia, where Emmylou attended Garfield Senior High School. While there, not only was she a straight-A student, but she played saxophone in the marching band and was also a cheerleader. It's no surprise that a young woman with such diverse talents became class valedictorian in 1965. After graduating, she moved on to the UNCG School of Music, Theater, and Dance at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, but not for the reasons you might think. Harris hadn't planned to become a singer. Instead, she studied drama with the idea of becoming an actor, appearing in numerous plays, including Shakespeare's The Tempest. On the side, though, she also began playing some live local music gigs in order to pay the bills. Ultimately, she dropped out of school. In an interview with Gibson, she said, "When I went and did some serious acting classes, I realized that it was work of a kind that I didn't have a natural instinct for compared to music."
I wanted to be an actress. And I say that because I had very little talent for it.
For someone who became quite the prolific staple of the genre, Emmylou Harris's roots were not in country music. Instead, in the 1960s, she fell in love with the music of folk legends like Joan Baez, Leonard Cohen, and Bob Dylan. Folk is adjacent to country, of course, and Harris wasn't a complete stranger to the country stars of the day. Growing up, her brother had an extensive collection of country music albums, introducing her to artists like Loretta Lynn, Johnny Cash, and Buck Owens. She told Gibson, "I wasn't unaware of it because my brother was a huge country fan way before it was popular to be one." She said the variety of musical influences helped her as she wasn't locked into just one idea of what kind of music she should play. "I was a kind of tabula rasa, not really having any inclination to anything. Between folk music and then discovering country, all roads were open to me. I could embrace each singer, each writer, each song. I never limited myself." According to biography, after Emmylou Harris dropped out of college, she moved to New York, where her first marriage to Tom Slocum only lasted a year before it fell apart. She then headed south to the Washington, D.C. area with her baby daughter, Hallie, to move back in with her parents. Harris sang and played guitar in many D.C. area music venues in the early 1970s, including the Cellar Door, the Assembly, the Red Door, and the well-known local chain, Clyde's. She was initially mentored by a music duo, Bill and Taffy Danoff, who played at the Cellar Door and had already established a local following. Harris told DCist, "They kind of took me under their wing, and introduced me to club owners that hired local talent. And that's kind of how I really got my start, from Bill and Taffy." It was at Clyde's where she met someone who would change the course of both her life and country music itself, Gram Parsons. In 1971, Harris was performing when she was spotted by Chris Hillman, a former member of the Byrds. He in turn recommended her to Gram Parsons. Harris told Gadfly, apparently Gram had mentioned to Chris Hillman that he was going to do a solo record, and he was looking for a woman to do sort of a George Tammy, Conway Loretta type of country duets. Parsons came out to meet her, and a year later, Harris got the call to come record a record with Parsons in Los Angeles. She also toured with Parsons and his band, the Flying Burrito Brothers, after they finished their album. Emmylou has always spoken very highly of her musical collaboration with Parsons, who bridged the gap between country and rock.
There was definitely a sort of a country audience of kids who, like myself, hadn't really grown up with it. But Gram kind of made it cool.
She told Gadfly, "I never had to struggle. It was almost like we were dancing partners who were able to fall into step with each other really quickly." Tragically, in 1973, Parsons died of a drug overdose at the age of just 26. Since then, Harris has sought to keep his musical memory alive, and in 1999, she produced a tribute album to Parsons entitled Return of the Grievous Angel, which included covers from artists like Beck, The Pretenders, and Lucinda Williams. Though she has had a fine solo career, Harris's time collaborating with Parsons set the stage for what would be a lifetime of high-profile musical collaborations both inside and outside of country music. The band, Tracy Chapman, Ryan Adams, Elvis Costello, Neil Young, and Bob Dylan are just some of the stars she has worked with. Working with Bob Dylan on his album Desire in 1976 was especially surreal for Harris, since she grew up admiring his music in the 60s when she was starting out. She told Gadfly, "Obviously, Dylan had a huge influence on me. Dylan was as close to a god as anybody I had ever met." Harris also had an unexpectedly fruitful collaboration with rock pop legend Roy Orbison. Harris and Orbison sang the top 10 hit country duet That Lovin' You Feelin' Again in the summer of 1980. The song went on to earn them a bevy of accolades, including a win for Best Country and Western Performance for a Duo or Group at the 1981 Grammy Awards. The song, written by Orbison and Chris Price, was also featured in the film Roadie, starring Meatloaf, and can be heard on Emmylou's compilation album Duets, released in 1990. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Harris can be heard singing on many pop rock studio albums, including backup vocals on Ryan Adams' album Heartbreaker, on the track Oh My Sweet Carolina, on Tracy Chapman's album Telling Stories, on multiple Luscious Jackson tracks from the 90s, and on two of Warren Zevon's albums from the early 2000s. She's famously performed live with the Dave Matthews Band many times. Not only does she perform with artists across the music spectrum, but she also performs covers from all genres, including a song by Jimi Hendrix on her album Wrecking Ball. Emmylou can also be seen performing on Jonathan Demme's documentary Neil Young, Heart of Gold, in which she joins Neil, his wife, and an arrangement of various popular musicians to perform songs from his album Prairie Wind for the first time live. In the 1970s, Dolly Parton, Linda Ronstadt, and Emmylou Harris joined forces to pitch a collaboration album after experiencing a special, harmonious sound together. Harris told the Northwest Arkansas Democrat-Gazette that the first time they sang together, quote, "It was a glorious sound." Despite the fact that all three women were individually huge stars, selling them as a group wasn't as easy as one might assume. Ronstadt told Taste of Country, "Nobody wanted it. Nobody else thought it was a good idea except for us. The record company didn't want it. None of the managers wanted us to do it, and none of the record companies wanted us to do it, because we were on different labels, so we'd be competing with each other's." Eventually, the concept album found a way, and Trio was finally released in 1987. It proved to be a success, winning a Grammy, Vocal Event of the Year at the 1988 CMAs, and Album of the Year at the 1987 Academy of Country Music Awards. The album included the hit cover Mr. Sandman. The three had recorded it in 1978, but when their efforts to release Trio initially failed, Harris re-recorded the song with herself playing all three parts, and it hit the Billboard Top 40 in 1981. Still, it would be another 6 years before they were able to release the album Trio. It proved that they had been right all along, and in 1999, they reunited for a second successful album, Trio 2. You may not even realize you've heard Emmylou Harris's voice featured in film and television, but she's been featured on numerous high-profile soundtracks over the course of her long career. For instance, Emmylou sang the theme song A Love That Will Never Grow Old for the Oscar-winning film Brokeback Mountain. The song won multiple awards, including a Golden Globe for Best Original Song in a Motion Picture. Harris also joined fellow artists Alison Krauss and Gillian Welch to sing the folk song Go to Sleep You Little Baby for the soundtrack of the award-winning Coen Brothers film Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? The album became one of the only soundtracks in Grammy history to win Album of the Year in 2002. Harris has also contributed to soundtracks for The Horse Whisperer and The Songcatcher, among other films. But she had never actually written an original song for a film until 2008, when she wrote the title song in Rodanthe for the Richard Gere and Diane Lane film Nights in Rodanthe. Harris told The Boot, "I was intrigued with the story when I first heard it, and I especially loved it because of the location. The Eastern Shore was a place I'd read about as a child in a book called Misty of Chincoteague." Promoting causes like feminism, ending racism, and ridding the world of landmines, Emmylou Harris is the organizer of an annual benefit tour called Concert for a Landmine-Free World. A portion of the proceeds also supports Vietnam vets. That's just one of her many causes. She has also joined fellow musician Sir Paul McCartney and the Dalai Lama, among others, to boycott Kentucky Fried Chicken due to their cruel practices in the factory farm and slaughterhouse business. She has also lent her talents numerous times to support Canadian musician Sarah McLachlan's Lilith Fair, including the first year's lineup in 1997, which is a celebration of women in music. Emmylou is a fervent supporter of her fellow female musicians and often acts as a mentor. Singer and Lilith Fair collaborator Jewel told Vanity Fair, "I'm a big Emmylou Harris fan." Emmylou Harris is also an avid animal activist and dog owner. She has partnered with PETA to build dog houses for pups in need of shelter. She has spoken out publicly about the need for pet owners to spay and neuter their furry family members, as well as to keep them indoors as opposed to being chained outside, particularly in the winter. In 2004, she founded a nonprofit dog rescue called Bonaparte's Retreat in Nashville, which is named after one of her dogs. Bonaparte is a haven for sheltered dogs to assist them in finding their forever families. They partner with Metro Nashville Animal Care and Control, as well as shelters within the surrounding area. Apparently, dogs come in handy as a touring musician. Harris said on the Bonaparte's Retreat website, "Once you have the experience of having a dog on the road with you, you don't realize how lonely you've been without one." Emmylou Harris is one of only 67 exclusive members of country music's most prominent and illustrious organizations, the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville, Tennessee. So, how did Harris earn her spot? Credentials like music sales, radio presence, a musician's touring history factor into the Opry's decision. Ultimately, the way an artist becomes considered for the honor is when a current member nominates you. Harris has been a member since 1992. In 2012, the Opry held a ceremony for her 20th anniversary as a member, in which she performed with Vince Gill and other artists. The Opry, of course, has been home to some of country music's biggest stars, including Johnny Cash, Patsy Cline, Patty Loveless, and Alison Krauss, and more recent popular artists like Blake Shelton, Carrie Underwood, and Brad Paisley. Harris said of joining the Opry crew, "I feel like I've come home to a family I didn't even know I was a part of." The night of her induction, she said, "Music is like food, sustenance. You certainly don't do it for the spotlight. You do it for the amazing exhilaration of singing, the feeling of the music going through you." Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more grunge videos about your favorite stuff are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.